Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. What I want to show you today is a system for applying sort of resource management to the game. I'll just get through, we're at the sort of character creation screen, which I've already shown you in previous videos, so I'll just get to the bit that's new. What I've added is I've added a system where the character has a certain amount of oil left in their lamp, the idea being they're sort of exploring a dark underground system of tunnels. And these arrows here represent movement, with the white arrows representing sort of cautious movement and the red arrows representing quick movement and less careful movement. So for example, it says we have 6 hours worth of oil left in a lamp. If we choose to go east and we go cautiously, we find that we now have 5 hours and 30 minutes worth. You can also see that because there's no tunnel east this time, those arrows are hollow to indicate that that isn't an option, and if we run the mouse over it, they won't turn into links. If I were to go at the fast speed, represented by the red arrows, I would not lose as much time. So for example, I go this way, and you can see that it only went down by 15 minutes. At the moment, there's no reason not to go quickly because, of course, the system is empty. I haven't programmed any monsters or other obstacles anyway. But when those obstacles do exist, moving quickly might give you disadvantages. So for example, if there are traps, if you're moving quickly, you'd be more likely to run into a trap or to not notice a trap. Whereas if you're moving cautiously, you're more likely to see it. Or if there are monsters, if you're moving cautiously, it's more likely that you'll see the monsters and sort of be able to choose to avoid them. Whereas if you're going quickly, you might sort of blunder into them. So that is the system. And if you run out of oil, you lose the game. Your lamp goes out, and so I'll just sort of quickly zip back and forth to show you how that works. So we've got 45 minutes left, and let's say we're not very careful, we do that. Your lamp runs out of oil. In the darkness, you are helpless against the monsters of the dungeon, and so you are assumed to have died that way. So that is the system. It might provide a certain amount of sort of interesting decision making as to whether to go quickly or fast, and how far out to explore and stuff, and so forth. So I'm going to spend the rest of the video showing you how it's coded. Let's just get back to that beginning, because this is quite a visual sort of layout. It's probably worth having a look at this, not so much the text underneath, but this layout of a picture sort of telling you where the tunnels are, and these graphics which give you the options of where to move. You should think of this as a 5x5 grid, because this is within a table. It's basically a 5x5 grid where each picture is in its own cell, and they're all of the cells are sort of different sizes because the pictures are different sizes, and unless you specify otherwise, the size of the cells will just depend on the size of the pictures in them or whatever's in them. But so let's say you imagine say sort of 4x4 little cells here. Then imagine that this is one big empty cell. This is another cell. This picture is within another cell. And then there's another cell under that, another cell under that. And then similarly, when we're moving across, there's sort of 4 empty cells up here. There's one cell there, big one in the middle, and then one cell each for those 2 arrows. So if you imagine this as a 5x5 grid, which it is in terms of the coding, it'll be a lot easier to picture what's happening. But so let's get into the code, get into Twine. Now, the on different computers and different web browsers, the game can look slightly different. Specifically, the color, the default color can be different. And so far, that hasn't mattered. But it does actually matter now because the arrow pictures, if you remember, there was a white arrow or a red arrow, but there was also a background, and that background is black, and so therefore the rest of the screen has to be black, or otherwise the picture would stand out. It would look wrong. So we have to make sure that it's displaying exactly the same color. And so that's the first thing I'll show you. And this is the way we do it. We go into this section called Style Sheet. And this is a section for CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It is specific commands that are used for web pages that tell the computer how the layout is going to work. CSS is a sort of almost not quite a programming language in itself, but it is very intricate, and I don't want to sort of do a full course in this. I'm just going to show you how to do particular things as they become needed. But I'll just zoom in so we can read that more easily. And I'll show you what I've done. So I've got body, curly brackets, and then background color, colon, black, semicolon. And then I've got a very similar command. In fact, it's identical, except that instead of body, it says hashtag UI bar, or UI dash or minus bar. Now, what this is doing is it's telling the computer that you remember that when we load up the story, you have sort of the main window on the right, and then you have the sort of sidebar on the left, the sidebar on the left with the picture of the character and the attributes. This tells the computer that the body, that the main window is to be black. There's a list of colours that it recognises. It recognises most sort of common colours. If you put black, red, or purple, you can also put it in terms of numbers, an RGB code where you would put one number for how much red and one for how much green and one for how much blue. But if you want to use a sort of normal colour like black or purple or whatever, there's quite a long list of colours that it will recognise. So that tells the body that it says that the main window is to be black, and this is exactly the same, except it says that the sidebar is to be black, and the body has to be black because the arrow pictures, the background of them is black, and it would look weird. They would sort of stand out if the background was anything else. And to me, it looked a bit weird having the sidebar being a different colour, so I made that the same colour. So once we've made the thing the same colour, I'll get into... Now, I've gotten into how movement works in a previous video, the one with the red thumbnail. It's called Dungeon-like Connections Between Areas. I think it's something like that. So I won't go into how the movement works except for the things that I've changed. But I will go into the display. So, as I say, it's a table, and think about it as a 5x5 grid. So we start by looking at M, which is a text string which tells you the exits from this particular room, the one that we're in. CX and CY are just our current coordinates. And it looks at the M array for that, which is obviously a two-dimensional array, and it will get a string of 4 characters which are all ones and zeros. So it might be 1001 or 1110 or 0111 or something like that. And what that means is it is 1 if there is a tunnel and 0 if there isn't. And it looks at whether there's a tunnel to the north, the east, the south, and the west in that order. So, for example, 1110 would mean there's an exit to the north, there's an exit to the east, there's an exit to the south, but there isn't one to the west. It always starts with 1111 just because the program always sets you up at a crossroads. So all this does is it looks in the folder where I've got the pictures of the tunnel illustrating the different combinations of tunnel and not tunnel, and it gets the picture that is appropriate to display, and it'll display that later. Div align equals center just means start a paragraph, and the paragraph is everything is centered in the screen. Start a table. Now, as I've said before, TR means a new row in the table, and TD means a new cell in that row, and then /TD means that's the end of the cell, and /TR means that's the end of the row. So we have the top row, and we have TD/TD and TD/TD. So that just means, okay, the first 2 cells are empty. It always goes from left to right. First 2 cells are empty, and then we come to the cell where the one of the up arrows might be. So there's quite a lot of code there, but I'll go through it. So TD style equals quote text align colon center. What all that means is anything that you put in this particular cell, put it in the center of the cell. Don't put it up against the left wall, which is the default, or don't put it to the right. Now, before, in a previous video, I showed you a sort of simpler format, which is this one, which is TD align equals center. That will work, but you're sort of not meant to use it. It's sort of slightly deprecated. The latest version of HTML doesn't use it, and you're meant to use this style format instead. Seems to me that they should have stuck with the easier one, but anyway, that's not the decision that was made. So this is the sort of more proper way of doing the same thing. TD style equals quote text dash align colon center unquote. It just means starting a new cell, and then everything in it is to be centered. So this is basically telling us whether we should print the red arrow that's filled in, indicating that we can go north at high speed, or the red arrow that isn't filled in, indicating that we can't go north. And we can go north if there's a tunnel to the north, if the 0th character, which is the first character in that string of ones and zeros. So if it was 1001, we would look at that first 1. That's what W0 is. If W0 is 1, in other words, if there's a tunnel to the north, and LO is over 0. LO is just lamp oil. So if we don't have lamp oil left and the character has sort of lost the game and they can't go anywhere, but if they've got any lamp oil left and if there's a tunnel to the north, then print this graphic as a link that'll send us to the move screen, which the move page, which is just the page that alters our well, moving alters your CX or your CY attribute, of course, because your coordinates are changing. That's what moving is. And if there's if we go to an area that it hasn't defined yet, it has to randomly generate it. I won't go into that because I did deal with how that works in the previous video, the dungeon-like connections video. And so it's telling us that it's an image. It's this particular image. This is just telling us the sort of address of the image. We should go to move, which means we should go to the page where, if necessary, we sort of randomly generate the new bit of the dungeon, if it is a new bit. And if we go there, CY is increased. Well, that makes sense because if you're moving north, of course, if you're think about X and Y coordinates, if you move north or up, the Y value increases. Similarly, if you move south, the Y value decreases. And Z to 0.25, that just means that that's the only new bit of the move page. It just takes that amount off your lamp oil. So the lamp oil is the amount of, or LO is the amount of lamp oil that you have in hours. So that's telling you that if you move quickly, take off a quarter of an hour of how much lamp oil you've got left. Or if you don't print that link, if the character has no lamp oil, or if there isn't a tunnel to the north, just print this this picture, which is n fast x. The format for these pictures is the first letter is the direction, so N, S, W, or E, and then it's either fast or slow. The fast ones being red and the slow ones being white. And then if it's the hollow ones that aren't a link, it's got X at the end. X as in it's barred. X is barred to you. A lot of the time when you're programming, you will need lots and lots of little tiny pictures that are only slightly different. And this is one of those occasions. There's sort of 16 different, because there's 4 directions, and then in each direction you can move quickly or slowly. So that's 8. And then for each of those, you can be given that option or not given that option. So that means there are 16 different pictures that are needed, each of which is only slightly different to the others. That's one of the things that comes up when you're representing things graphically. But let's get back to the code, and then we just close off the cell. So all that's saying is print an arrow going or pointing upwards, pointing to the north, and it's either going to be a link or it's going to be sort of a non-link if we don't have that option. And then we just have TD. We just have two more empty cells. So I won't go through every single one of these because it sort of works basically the same. The second row is pretty much the same, except that the graphic that is relevant is the one that is for slow movement, and the main difference with that is that that Z array is now 0.5 instead of 0.25, meaning it'll take more time to move slowly than move quickly. And then the third row we have movement west. We have the Z, which is the picture, the relevant picture showing which tunnels we have, or it's just a blank picture of the same size if we've run out of lamp oil and died. And then we have the movements to the east, which are the same, except that of course X is, if you're moving east, X is increased, whereas if you move west, it's decreased. And the pictures are different, of course, because we want the arrow to be pointing a different way. And then the fourth row and the fifth row are sort of mirrors of the first and the second, except that they have the southward pointing arrows. and y is minus minus, which means reduced by 1, instead of plus plus, which means increased by 1. And so the fifth row is the same again. Then we have the messages that are to do with lamp oil. So there's a few different things that can happen. You might have no lamp oil. You might have no lamp oil but be at the entrance, in which case I decided that, okay, you can sort of just make it and you leave the dungeon. Or you can run out of lamp oil and not be at the entrance, in which case you lose the game and die. Or you can have some lamp oil left, and then we have to, the way that it works is, this is a new command, math.floor. I've shown you math.round, which rounds a fraction or a decimal to a whole number. Math.floor is specifically rounding down. So if it's 1.999, it'll round it down to 1 rather than, even though 2 is closer. So Z is math.floor for the LO, lamp oil attribute. So that is the sort of whole number of hours that you have left. And then Y is, we take any remainder from that, we take Z away from LO, and then we multiply by 60 because, for example, if it's 0.25, we want that to be 15 minutes, or 0.5, we want to display that as 30 minutes, and 0.75 as 45 minutes. And then we just have different, basically it just tells the player how many hours and minutes they have left, but there's various sort of grammar differences, like if they've got no hours left, you wouldn't say you have 0 hours and 15 minutes, you would just say you have 15 minutes. If you have 1 hour left, you wouldn't say you have 1 hours and 15 minutes, you would say you have 1 hour. Whereas if you have more than 1 hour, you would say you have hours and minutes. So that's why there's this quite complicated bit of code. I could have just put you have Z hours and Y minutes, but that feels a bit cheap if it's going to start saying you have 1 hour's worth or 0 hours worth. It's not quite right. So I took the time to code a sort of grammatically correct way of saying it. Of course, another way to do it is just to put something like hours : Z, minutes : Y. But again, like maybe for a science fiction story, but that sort of readout doesn't seem right for a fantasy theme, at least not to me. So it seemed better to tell people. Of course, another way to do it is to have a graphic. You could have a picture of a lamp and sort of the oil gets lower and lower. But I, for now, have gone with text. And then finally, if you are at the entrance and you have some lamp oil left, it gives you the choice to leave. And the reason it has to be that your lamp oil is over 0 is because if your lamp oil has run out and you're at the entrance, it doesn't give you the choice. You have to leave. And so it's already printed that. Let's go up and I'll show you. Oops, sorry. Yeah, if you've run out of oil and you're at the entrance, it's already given you the text and the link to continue. And so you don't want to do that twice. So now, if you've got lamp oil left and you're at the entrance, it says you're at the dungeon entrance and you may leave the dungeon if you wish, but in this particular case, you don't have to. So that is the system. A point of that is to make the player sort of think about the moves that they make, because as I add to the game, I want to make each expedition into the dungeon sort of cost money because the player has to hire people to go with them and pay particular costs and stuff. And so once they're in the dungeon, if there's a sort of ticking clock, well, that'll force them to be careful, and it'll force them to think about really think about how many moves they can make and whether particular things are worth it. I would also like to randomise this somewhat, so that instead of going down by exactly 15 minutes, perhaps it goes down by sort of between 10 and 20 minutes or something like that. But that's for later development. And there are other sort of options that one could easily imagine having, like, for example, that they come across some source of lamp oil and so they can refill their lamp, or there's perhaps access to a light spell that can or some sort of spell that allows them to see in the dark temporarily or something like that, so that they don't necessarily lose the game straight away if they run out of oil. But anyway, that's that's the system that I've coded so far, and I hope that it was of interest to at least some of you, and I hope that you will join me next time.